Hey,
Maria hasn't
darlings.
slept for the third day. She couldn't eat or relax. She couldn't even close her eyes. She couldn't do anything. And it was all because of him, because of Slavik. Slavik was her husband, and they lived together for almost a quarter of a century. Soon they were supposed to celebrate a wedding. But now it is not clear whether she will have someone to sit with at the festive table. They gave birth to two children. He even gained a granddaughter from his eldest son. And now, is that all? Masha couldn't accept this. As always that morning, Slavik woke up at the usual am, kissed Masha on the cheek, drank coffee in the kitchen, and ate two boiled eggs for breakfast in general. Over the years, the man changed his habits less and less, and precisely these mornings have become the norm for them since he got married and the youngest son moved into a separate house. Silently, peacefully, just the two of them, talking about this and that, just an ideal family that has gone through all the possible storms of life, hand in hand, and now likes to be in a cozy harbor. So Slavik was cheerful, played a lot, and even like he was flirting, and usually didn't compliment her often. And suddenly in the morning, my dear, and what would I do without you? Did I really feel something? Maria sobbed and smelled better in a large hand-knitted scarf. On a chair, his eyes began to run from Glado. I already remembered that it was Slavka who gave her this scarf on her last wedding anniversary, just when her joints started to hurt a little due to age. I thought he was finished, and here it is, a warm scarf from Natural Poo is already warming his wife, and what will warm her now if Slavik is gone? Memories. What are they for when she got used to the fact that she is married to Masha? Well, in the sense of her husband and no one else can give her this feeling. Slavik was really unique about these men saying that they don't exist now, but only Masha knew for sure that there could be another place. But she has Slavka. Of course there are few of them, but that is why they are valuable. That's why they are dear to Masha throughout her almost quarter-century-long life. Family life is not. I knew what a lack of money was, having grown up with very poor parents. If not poor, Maria, after marriage, literally found herself in a fairy tale. And what happened to her sisters? Her mother and father shared a small room with all, a separate three-room apartment with an improved layout, with two balconies and a working garbage bin. Sometimes it's something incredible. At first, she even thought that she was dreaming and that she would open her eyes, but nothing happened. It was all just a dream, but nothing disappeared. Besides, Slavik turned out to be wonderful. Extracts from every money received and from a house, something beautiful, valuable, and necessary. In short, he pleased his young wife as best he could. Then wonderful things began to appear, like good video cassette recorders and a little later CD players. Their family was quite poor. Although their mother and father worked in a local glass factory, the only thing they had was a salary that made it impossible for their parents to buy any of these luxury items. But Maria already had all of this, and even one excellent music center and a microwave oven, an automatic washing machine, and a boiler hanging in the corner of the bathroom. And the separate toilet brought Masha to indescribable delight after that hostile bathroom that she had become accustomed to throughout her life. This celebration of life with barely concealed envy, and Maria enjoyed meeting her beloved husband. Masha met her Slavik by chance at a bus stop. Her heel broke and the girl cried a lot, sitting on a bench because she had to go, and there were no other shoes. The girl was already thinking about what she would look like in the drag shoes that she and her sister didn't have, just for those occasions when it was necessary to wear casual outerwear, when suddenly a beautiful car pulled up to the bus stop, stopped contrary to the rules, and a handsome man got out. Although she was young at the time, Slavka, but she still attracted the girl's eyes. What is called from kindergarten to retirement. He is in the mountains, and this beautiful girl cries without comfort, and immediately suggested that she stop by the nearest shoe store that close around the corner. Of course, Masha at first thought that he was joking or mocking her, but it turned out that he was not, and then they began to meet calmly about the fact of her chosen one, of one simple family of ordinary workers, had an exceptional education, and in general he simply could not see anything in her. I decided that I would become a family and its prospects. And Slavik himself fully kept his word. As they said in the last Soviet years, the nomenklatura was the reason he was well since childhood. All that came to mind was that his relatives in the late S rode on good Volgas instead of Eard Zaporizets or even Ziguli cars. They could vacation on the Black Sea coast and generally did not deny themselves anything. But the Slavik himself received a driver's license as soon as he became an adult license and his first car, albeit a little supported, but still a European foreign car, and then he went and went to do business, for example, those same naming connections, and also numerous acquaintances among the powerful. In this world of this world, the young and energetic man also had no shortage of ideas, and the times were suitable for all tastes. They provided opportunities, just don't miss them, just grab them. At that point, the deal was just developing, getting up. So the newly formed man suffered, but Slavik was not one of those who give up easily from the mid-90s until the S. He already had all the luxury that captured the imagination of his young wife. The man believed that providing wealth for his family was his most important mission, and he accomplished it successfully. Masha, of course, had the opportunity not to work for a day, and Slavik's business partners would not have understood if the wife of such a prominent man stood by the fireplace or moved, so that Maria would become, as it is now fashionable among young people, say, a fairy of home comfort. The days when the article for parasitism and therefore Maria settled at home for completely legal reasons. At first it was unusual for her to live amidst all this luxury that surrounded the hostel. Everyone found themselves on equal terms, and there was no such thing. So that in one room a luxurious renovation with expensive furniture was carried out, and in the next room there was complete poverty and devastation. Rather, it can be said that poverty was literally saturated with gray and indefinite. The poor interiors are stamped and approximately the same for everyone. In some places, even simple homemade equipment, for example, Masha, the eldest among all the sisters, slept on the same crumpled sofa with her middle sister and did not see anything of reprehensible in this. She immediately had at her disposal an entire kingdom, which she was very used to. Little by little, and not immediately, it was difficult for the girl from the workers' dormitory to believe that she would now be able to manage all this. For example, it was not immediately that she learned how to correctly use all this foreign equipment, as the girl said, like a washing machine or a microwave oven. It was easier for her to heat a dish in the old-fashioned way in a frying pan or wash with her hands, but only her husband taught his wife that now they lived differently, in a new way. Not how their parents lived, and they need to keep up with the times because of the response to Slavik's fervent requests.
Ash.
Little by little, Masha mastered everything he gave her and what he insisted on using. Maria, like many women who grew up in poverty, knew how to perfectly cook what is called from scratch and make excellent crafts. Altering, embroidering, or knitting helped her, a girl from a very poor family, where besides her two more girls grew up to look like those who could dress their daughters beautifully. At first, Masha tried to beautify her wardrobe exactly as she was used to, with embroidery and knitting, brooch, and where she altered old things, but Slavik simply forbade her to engage in such nonsense and began to continually take her to fashion stores there. In the realm of glamorous hats, flowing and impractical scarves, but such beautiful high-heeled shoes, Maria simply turned into a real doll every time that her loving husband never tired of admiring. A young girl on whose head suddenly all these things fell into her head: fashionable perfumes, rings and bracelets, stylish things for the interior and execution of all desires. She never tired of thanking her husband for these metamorphoses in her life, and over time he literally became her god. She trusted Slavik in everything and saw that it was not in vain that he would not let her and Masha down much. Deliciously. And now she couldn't make dishes from one chicken. That's exactly how they ate in her paternal family, so that there was enough for everyone for a week, and she allowed herself to buy everything in the first supermarkets in her big city she wanted. even seafood gourmet or red meat, which has always been very important to her. A rare and festive dish, although Maria never refused fruit at the World Cup. Her husband never scolded her for excessive spending. On the contrary, he always praised her for an inventively thought-out menu and a superbly set table. Boasted about his thrifty wife to his business partners, colleagues, and friends, and Masha felt at the height of happiness. She gradually took on the role of the wife of a rich and influential man and had no time to rest. To the domestic coast, and then quickly switched to flights to exotic countries. At first Masha was very afraid of planes and everything connected with them, but Slavik hugged her so tightly during the flight, called her a fool so affectionately, and asked her not to be afraid and relax, that over time Masha not only got used to the flight, but even fell in love with him. And it was at the right time, because the geography of her movements around the world was constantly expanding. For Maria, it was a golden age. She was bathed in love and rays of support from her husband. She didn't need anything and didn't worry about anything. The young woman had the opportunity. Take care of herself and take care of her own development, slept as much as she needed, ate as her body demanded, and had the opportunity to acquire all the cosmetic novelties that appeared in the country. Her husband's business slowly but surely went up, and, therefore, she was not limited in finances. They didn't have children right away. Although they did not want Slaviks immediately, he believed that first he and Mashenka needed to enjoy life only for themselves, so their first child was born after the age of years of marriage. By this time Masha had already She became an experienced wife. She understood perfectly what her husband needed, and therefore the sun set without any problems. When the husband returned from work, the child was fed and clothed. The house was in perfect order and a variety of delicious dishes were steaming on the table. In short, there was no single reason to complain about his wife's mismanagement. Slavik was not happy. On the contrary, he was happy, and, to celebrate, he even gave Maria a car, paying for it. Along the way, in courses to obtain a driver's license, now Masha was even more mobile and could easily do this in the middle of the day. To go with her son anywhere, she used it actively, and that's why the child went to swimming pools and martial arts, and also had many tutors. A few years after the first, Masha and Slavik went to the WDO. Slavik always wanted 2 children, but Masha had no reason to object. Furthermore, my father knew how to provide for his children excellently. The second son was also born, and Slavik was incredibly happy. For his second son, Masha received a full-fledged country house. Her husband had more opportunities. They started calling the house a dacha and spent time there from Friday to Monday, so the boys could move around more and breathe fresh air. So Slavik not only loved his wife, but also supported him well into the late 90s or early 90s. In the US, this was not very common. Generally, people only then got used to living without total savings, and in some places even to absolute poverty, and then, when children were born in Slavik, like a caring husband, increased the number of several gifts, but this also did not become common. So, the machine sisters themselves were unlucky in life. They were unable to find and choose worthy spouses for themselves. The middle sister, who was only a year and a half younger than Maria, after graduating from a vocational school, began dating a guy on the side. They both worked on the same construction site. He was a tiler and she was a painter, but somehow it didn't work out. Either one of them had very high expectations, or it was because middle also wanted to live in the same luxury as the older one. But this guy gradually moved away from the girl, and I want to look for someone to dress and put on shoes and would definitely take him to a foreign resort a couple of times a year. But somehow I was unlucky in the search. Something didn't work out after washing. For several years that was my middle sister's name. She gave birth to a son. It's not clear from whom, and finally, then she settled down to live at home, stayed in the room with her parents because there was no place other than go, not to the main heating, but to go with the baby. So it's true Slavik, taking pity on his sister's nephew and his mother, bought them in his name a small, but separate one-room apartment, not very far from it. The house where she and Masha lived, so I literally kissed everyone's hands. They understood, of course, that the apartment wasn't Rita's and would never belong to her. But still, living like this was better than all of us crammed together. Together in square meters furthermore, hearing the drunken fights of the neighbors who were in recent years, Rita began to settle more and more in a well-inhabited apartment, eventually taking her son to kindergarten and always thanking her older sister and her brother-in-law in any way she could. As a rule, it was her help that the spouses resorted to when they needed to go somewhere without children. Then the boys were taken care of by Aunt Margarita, so it was more comfortable and peaceful for them. After all, hiring a nanny is actually someone from outside. This is not the wife's own sister and will take more care of her responsibly and feed it better. And she has reason to be grateful, because she will do everything in good faith, and the boys loved her sincerely, because in her company it was possible to behave a little badly in the presence of their parents. Always possible. Maria's second sister, the youngest, also did not get as good a job in life as Maria managed, but it was she who received at least some kind of education, but not strictly university. Yulia managed to enter a technical school and graduate from it, so the girl's career was built through her own efforts. Kindergarten teacher, and it seems that she did not regret anything. Yulia got married at almost years old, gave birth to 2 children with a small age difference, but lived her whole life with her husband in a small fourth apartment on the outskirts of Maria. She felt sorry for the cheerful and fun Yulka, but still she understood, albeit in her own way. But her sister was not happy. You need to get to her. Moreover, over time, she even rose to the position of methodologist. And now, it seems, the director of a kindergarten can apply for a position if the issue of education is resolved, at least by correspondence. So, not everything was so bad for her, but Maria will feel bad for her. Oh, if something happens to her, Slavko, what will she do? Live after the death of her loved one. On that fateful day, her husband's assistant called her and said that at a meeting of the board of directors, Svyatoslav Gennadievich felt bad, turned white, grabbed his heart and collapsed into his luxurious leather chair. Of course, they immediately called a paid private ambulance and transported him to one of the good medical centers. They promised to do everything possible and impossible for this. He recovered. But so much time has passed and no positive news. Only the receptionist also answers on duty every call that the patient is in a moderately stable condition and is doing everything possible and what is prescribed by Masha protocols in the second. I couldn't bear the day of Slavik's admission to this hospital, and I went myself. The woman really wanted to have first-hand information about what and how, what could be done for him. They welcomed her. One might even say solemnly. The department head specially set aside time for the wife of such an important person and invited her to their office, avoiding the usual office hours. Everything there exuded respectability and professionalism. But the conversation itself did not please Masha at all. The head of the department was a fat man and all kinds of. The chubby man treated Masha as he was apparently accustomed to treating the wives of other high-ranking patients. Masha had heard stories from her husband more than once about how as soon as one of his business partners ended up in a hospital bed with a man beautiful, serious diagnosis, the wives immediately began to calculate what and how can be received as an inheritance after the death of the breadwinner. Apparently, this person also considered her a shark who was already counting the profits in her mind and dreams of flying to the Cayman Islands to celebrate. Finally, with her long-awaited widowhood and newfound freedom, Masha was disgusted that they would think this way about her, because she sincerely cared that everything would be fine with her Slavik, that he would survive so that he could continue to please her and her children and grandson in his presence, and this head of the department continues to write a dictation about how my husband's heart attack may not be the first and the state of the blood vessels leaves much to be desired. and the results of the coronography indicate that Masha was disgusted. Listen to this talk for about. She didn't understand the medical issue. Why is this pompous turkey sitting here and not on duty all the time at Slavik's bedside? If he paid attention to the patients being treated by him, apparently Maria's opinion of the doctor in particular, and the clinic in general was reflected directly on her face because the head of the department suddenly, somehow, USC stopped moralizing and entering the medical jungle and suggested that she simply visit her husband in the madness ward. Happily grabbing such a minute cart, was packed in a disposable blue medical cover. In the hospital corridor, on both sides there were white plastic doors of rooms, and behind each of them Masha suddenly thought that there was someone's fate, someone's loved ones, someone's relatives and loved ones who were in the nearest room. To the nursing station, this is how the head doctor described it. Judging by his tone, he was very proud that such a room was at his disposal, and Maria looked only at her husband Slavik. Her Slavik was all pale, and his skin took on a pronounced earthy tone. Her husband's eyes were. It closed, and I just honked the horn near the bed. The monitor for reading and recording his heart rate remembered that he was still alive. We put him in medicated sleep, the head of the department murmured nearby, but Masha hardly paid any attention to him. What difference does it make what he says? Maria approached Slavik and took his hand. Such warm skin. Why doesn't he react to this with his Masha, with whom he lived in legal marriage for years? Why doesn't he open his eyes? Don't say hello. You are strong. You can do anything, Masha whispered to her husband, looking at the family and lips so well defined you never gave up, and don't even think about starting now. Show them. Everything you can get out. You understood in some movie a long time ago. Masha saw something similar there. A man was in a coma, and his wife came to him every day and repeated encouraging phrases when he came out of the coma. He was able to repeat them exactly. He said he heard everything she told him. Maria wanted to believe that Slavik could hear her now too, because he had. He simply had to recover now, in the end with his. It is clear that it is possible to be cured because they will buy any medicine, they will allow themselves any treatment. I am responsible. He carefully took Masha by the elbow and asked her to leave the room. And Maria herself understood that she would hardly be allowed to do so. Staying here for a long time, she said goodbye to Slavik and promised her husband that she would look for him tomorrow now. She dreamed that this very tomorrow would come as quickly as possible, and she would have the opportunity to see her husband at home again. It wasn't like that, and it wasn't all something she assumed. She immediately dropped that matter and took on something else. She was not attracted to anything. She did not attract her attention. So she lived only in anticipation of the next meeting with Slavik. This meeting took place and was almost no different from the previous one. Still, Slavik was lying on the bed up to his chin, wrapped in a blanket, and even then the man remained silent. Masha didn't even know what to say to him in the presence of strangers in the room. The medical team never left her alone with her husband, did that too. Difficult to concentrate in a few days, Maria literally became different from herself. Where did the energy go? And the joy of life? Every now and then the woman thought that she could be alone at any time. But she didn't want that now. Maria essentially had a few years left. She had just turned. If everything had happened, if it was fine with Slavik, then she would have simply calmly waited for the same berry again, and then suddenly, as luck would have it, all the age-related diseases, which she had not paid attention to before, began to progress. So we will be stuck there. And it's not easy to say that Maria was going through her husband's serious illness. The children, of course, saw this is happening to his mother, but they were unable to provide any significant help to her. They both, to the best of their strength and capabilities, took the time to go to his father in the hospital, but nothing further was needed, because the man was simply lying under the braces. The eldest son even brought his mother's grandson a couple of times, but Ta somehow doesn't really bother anyone. Maria considered herself still too young to be considered a grandmother, but when Slavik was next to her, then they had fun calling each other grandmother and grandfather, and sitting alone in their beloved. Sitting in her husband's chair, she did not want to remember the transience of life. The eldest son, of course, was in a hurry with the children. And this also happens with marriage in any case. Thought the husband, but it ended like this. You can't go against nature. You fell in love and that's it. Without arguments from the father and mother about the fact that his girlfriend could very well have had an abortion, since they didn't. They worried about taking the necessary care. Their son was not accepted because the baby was born. Of course, Maria and Slavik had completely different plans for their eldest son. But everyone had to be partially postponed and partially adjusted. The young people were given a small but quite comfortable two-bedroom apartment in a new building as a starting point and received a certain amount of monthly money for maintenance, although the son also received a lot. He pleased his parents with the fact that he did not give up his studies at all. He just transferred to the correspondence department. He found an opportunity to earn extra money and found it, but no one expected it easily. Profited from a business that was not very profitable, but good for starting a business. Yes, and at least something was allocated for a young family to start with. It turns out that little Igor grew up in a completely ordinary family. So I remember that my husband was very proud that his father had a son who was not yet an adult and was no longer afraid of life's difficulties and was ready to overcome. They, together with their beloved Masha, were simply in seventh heaven with happiness. Was she very lucky in the world of vulgarity and betrayal to meet such a real and sincere man? His two continuations of him in the future. Maria's heart sank again. When the woman thought that Slavik had not come to his senses for a week. How is this possible? Why are these Rook's doctors not doing anything? Maybe he needs to go to the capital. Maybe only there they can help him. And she is sitting here with her hands folded and the phone is still idle. The doorbell rang suddenly, and the woman jumped in surprise and looked at the number that was reflected on the screen of the fashionable phone of the world-famous company's latest flagship, a gift husband's. Recent March. Wow. Not from the hospital, and that's good because she, like all normal people in her situation, was very afraid of calls from there. Judging by the inscription, it was her sister Margarita who called, the same one who lived nearby and with whom her children were so friendly. You are doing? It's easier to bet Margot on the phone. What news from the hospital? Nothing. They talk about the state for an hour. Masha told her sister everything she thinks about modern medical centers, even private and paid ones, as well as about whoever works there. Patiently listened to everything that was falling into her head. Maria, it's been a long time. I got used to my sister's character and understood that in such a situation she needed to at least talk in front of someone. The most important thing in the conversation with Margarita happened, as always, at the end. Shy and as if not at ease, asked her older sister for a loan for Masha herself. The fact of such a request was incredibly surprising because for many years the middle sister got along very well with what she herself earned, and then that why couldn't I? You can't resist asking. She, of course, Masha understood this. This is undiplomatic and wrong, but still, why does the sister suddenly need such an amount? Margarita, in response, became even more embarrassed. In a hurry, inventing a reason. But she said that at first Maria and I suspected, your nephew Vovchik needs to pay for the second semester of studies, but he has no money. Well, I didn't calculate it somehow, but could you help? Of course, Maria could easily give her sister the required amount. However, the Supreme Court was not as simple with this issue. Margarita wanted to imagine this. The fact is that in the relationship between Maria and Slavik, the middle sister quickly realized the bonanza that the eldest had achieved for herself and tried to take the man's capital under her protection. She needed one thing, another thing. Her parents were suffering from poor conditions and lack of money, and you, Masha, can't shell out money for your money bags and so on. So the husband somehow managed to get Rick out of the family wallet. Feat of his, she wasn't sure if she could be so tough. Upright and consistent like her husband in financial matters. Yes, he never spared anything for her, but he did not spoil his relatives too much, whether Rhodite or because for them Masha herself was in trouble and gave her an apartment. And her son, otherwise, where would they go without this help? Would they share where they would live, and for what money? Masha understood that she should think carefully before giving her sister any money, because it is not known when Slavik will again be able to stand guard over the capital family, and her Maria is a kind person and Ridka will do this all her life. Successfully uses, having started to stop, it will be so difficult to think about what and how. It is not difficult for Masha to give her a certain amount, but from experience she knows that such requests will not stop on their own, which means that it is easier not to give even a penny. Maria could not immediately find the words to explain to her sister that she cannot just take and give her a considerable amount of money, by the way, and that it is better for them to discuss this problem again. When her husband leaves, feels at least a little better because now she is very tense and can't do it. Doesn't think about anything other than her husband's health, but Rithi seems to like this answer. She didn't like it because she blurted it out without even thinking just what was in her head. That's how the lady of the Copper Mountain said it. You were looking at you. You are just an expensive accessory to him. It is clear to you. Despite the fact that Masha was actually thinking about something else now, these words sank deep into her soul, which means that her husband was right about this man. He was right and insightful. More than once or twice Slavik regretted the fact that Margarita grabbed a piece of food with her teeth. Will no longer miss her, and having received the opportunity to live for free with her son, born from someone she does not know, at the expense of her son-in-law, she felt completely unpunished, knowing the soft-hearted and contradictory period. Masha slowly took away the phone from her ear and pressed the hang-up button. Tears flowed from the woman's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness or regret, but simply tears of some kind of relief. Margarita, without knowing and without wanting to, seemed to awaken some kind of inner core on her older sister, giving her the opportunity to fight for her future and wait until her beloved husband comes to his senses. After crying with joy, Maria went to the kitchen and began to do what she always did best in the kitchen. She put the dough on the pies and called her children, inviting them to small friendly games. To Masha's surprise, both children expressed a desire to join several pie eaters tonight. Mary thought bitterly that a parent had to be literally at the edge of the grave for their children to begin to appreciate what they were doing. Have and give more attention to her. Neither family nor family work, neither friends nor hobbies mean that it is possible, although on the other hand before, and they were not much since they grew up, she and Slavik always had a rich and very interesting life. Her husband was constantly inventing something to do and Masha enthusiastically accepted the plans of any husband. And what can I say in the presence of such material opportunities that the spouse could be proud of? Probably there was no such entertainment that was inaccessible to them during the years of their life together. Maria and Gloria, wherever they were and what, they just didn't see it. But only now did Masha realize that it was as if she didn't have time to say the most important thing, didn't say something to Slavko just so that he was left holding hands and eye to eye. I don't make films with him, maybe funny or maybe stupid. It doesn't matter at all. Just now, for a minute, she desperately wanted to discuss this with him, without laughing at the content of countless anecdotes and incidents from life, even their own and in general. She was not able to imagine that at any moment Slavik could simply not become what he was. Maybe it will simply cease to exist, and she will never be able to talk to him and touch him again. Do not part with your loved ones. I remembered a phrase from an old New Year's film, and Masha again wanted to cry from an effort of will, knowing that in an hour her children would ring the bell. Maria pulled herself together and I finally finished making the pies. The dish was a success and mother's get-togethers with grown-up boys, and even better in the company of her children. Masha seemed to have thawed her soul, and for some reason believed that the worst was over, and soon everything would become clear and Slavik would. Finally, she will come to her senses. Meanwhile, 2 more painful uncertainties and ambiguities passed, and the doctor's predictions became completely sad. Conversations were painful for her to keep them to a minimum, and if possible she avoided discussing her husband's condition with anyone. Margarita called twice, and both times Masha simply refused to speak to her sister, as if she felt the condition of Masha. She demanded, insisted, and swore every time. Accused Maria of caring exclusively about her own children and not wanting to help her son. But such conversations Masha was in a state of shock in the hospital. Margarita apparently did not understand such subtle matters because she did not show a drop of sympathy or understanding that Masha clearly saw that for the middle sister she is just a resource, and the resource is not the most valuable. It would be more correct to even call her a consumable, and it was very offensive to understand, given the colossal support of Masha and her husband, Rithi, who raised her son alone without a man. But other than that, everything was as usual. Time did not flow, but as if it dragged slowly. It was impossible to know where the night was and where the day was, where the morning was and where the night was for Maria, who was used to dedicating herself entirely to the house and her husband. This was especially painful and unusual for her, but she still woke up early, around in the morning, to prepare that same familiar and favorite breakfast for herself. Man, only in the second week he didn't eat those breakfasts, and in general, apparently, he didn't eat anything. Maria was struggling with some oppressive feeling inside her, but she did it badly. All the woman's thoughts were focused on her husband and his health. Her children tried as best they could to support their mother, and even her own parents showed the situation in their 7 daughters. I saw only good things about my son-in-law and helped them with their housing as much as possible and bought them little things, then appliances or something else. And in general, the guy Slavik was not greedy, open-hearted. He helped more than once and came to the rescue just when it was necessary. Only now Masha realized that, having lived to her age, she has no idea. Things that many of your colleagues have heard about or know from experience. She never had to deal with many unpleasant things in family life, protect her from betrayal, lies, and violence, and she didn't want to. Did not want to lose a husband like that. It seemed unfair to Masha that many other men live a full life that they probably do not deserve, and Slavik is lying in a hospital bed. And with every day that he spends in this state, he has every less and less chance that one day he could live like he was used to, like they both were used to. One day they called her from the clinic and asked her to come. Maria's heart seemed to break the moment she heard this request, but they ran to calm her down. No, he is still alive. The question concerned another doctor. The doctor insists that with such indicators the patient is not transportable and clearly felt out of place. All the visitors who gathered here today looked closely at the woman. And that was not little, but 7 people, and all of them. They were waiting for her verdict. Maria didn't understand anything about medicine, but from what they told her, she came to a conclusion during the transport. It is more likely that her husband will die staying here. He has a great chance of surviving. But she decided to take advantage of this chance despite the fact that those with whom Slavik conducted his business all the time. She refused to sign a permit for transportation abroad with a heavy heart. Masha left the office. She felt in her back the hatred with which many of her recent interlocutors were looking at her. Maria decided to herself that she would not. Her children will communicate more with doctors. It is possible that they will talk to doctors and she cannot and does not want to make such decisions. A lot of responsibility falls on who signs or does not sign. How can she know what is best for the man himself? Oh, how Masha wanted to return to those years of that golden age when she could go to her husband on any issue and get advice and help from him. The wife got into the car in the parking lot near the medical center. She could go home, but she didn't want to go again. Sitting between 4 walls where everything is absolutely everything. Every little detail reminded her of Slaviki, and that's why Maria decided to visit her friend Inna, whom she hadn't seen for several months, after she dialed her number and received an invitation from Masha to the supermarket and bought more delicious food. Inna was her only friend, one might say, since childhood spent in a hostel. The girl then married a simple guy from a working-class family, lived with him for a few years, so he started drinking and they ran away. Inna at that time was already a nanny and lived together in an apartment. She got an apartment over time. Even though it was small, but still quite comfortable, Masha secretly helped Inna buy a small house. Possessions that would have been small by her husband's standards. She was the one who gave her expenses to Inna anyway. And since the woman worked, she was able to save up for a small hotel on the outskirts. She went to her friend to cry and ask for advice on what to do next. Inna met her old friend. Good, but I couldn't resist pointing out, Masha, you don't take care of yourself. Look in the mirror. Who do you look like? Please, dark circles, hairstyle doesn't smell, and hands. How did Masha understand that Inna was right in everything? She was right. She really got careless. It seemed like very little time had passed since her husband had a seizure. But for Masha, it had been almost a quarter of a century since she had gotten used to taking care of herself, and suddenly this happened to her. Ended with her husband's illness, she seemed to have found herself in another world. Now it is not easy for her to find her former self under the ruins of what happened with Slavik's illness. Her husband helped her stay afloat. He was her lifeline and strongest motivator. Maria barely restrained herself from shedding a tear, and Inna immediately noticed this and patted her friend on the shoulder in approval until the evening. Bergamot, and remembering the past Inna was not very. Hunting words, yes, and Masha, in general, is also a friend from above. A story about Rita's unworthy behavior towards her older sister, and Masha said, "Be careful. Listen to the mosquito. You shouldn't stop this vicious practice call. Let the goat into the garden. I've been telling you for a long time. You can say, with honest work, you've earned a callus on your tongue. Keep your Rita away from Slavik. Otherwise, you'll know how it happens. I'm telling you, Daddy, don't shake your head. I understand that Slavik himself is now like a helpless child, but you also take him away from his family. Masha is jealous. She is not kind. She doesn't want the best for you, but greedy Inna was silent for her money and looked sympathetically at Maria. Indeed, she already understood what she wanted, but her friend could not tell her what Masha will probably become a rich heiress in the near future, and this means that there is no one around. There will be many unpleasant personalities running around, and how could she, under the influence of grief, not become a victim of people like Rita or even Rita herself? Clear and sober about the situation with her middle sister, and saw how right Inna was, the only thing she still hoped for. The woman hopes that Slavik will find the strength to live because she needs him so much. Like air, she cannot live without him. And the children he raised, and for whom he became a wonderful father, are also not yet ready to continue the path of life. Without her wise advice and light irony, Inna saw hesitation on her friend's face and suggested with all her characteristic intransigence, "Do you want to stay with me? Let's house them somehow. If Rika calls while I'm at home, then call. Then you want to run with me. You know, I will not put a word in my pocket," and I did not hesitate to return strong words to accept Inna's invitation, but I noticed to myself that this could be a way out of that abyss of pain and despair that swallowed her more and more every day. The emergency port. Masha sincerely thanked her friend, and the conversation moved on to other, much more fun subjects. The daughter of the car. Suddenly, when she was about to leave Inna, the clinic's number appeared on the display, and for some reason the woman became nervous about having to shake hands so that her fingers wouldn't shake. She had already received these calls more than once. Time from both the attending doctor and the administration, but now for some reason she could not press the green button to answer the call. Inna waited and waited. Even in these matters, it was clear to the person that this was not good. And after the news that her husband's condition was getting worse every day, and finally Masha Deal repeated that her husband died. He died. Now Maria began a vigorous activity, and she simply did not have time to take care of her sister, or even think about her to express her condolences to the young and inconsolable corners of the world. All those who met Slavik during his life, they asked her to get stronger, to hold on, not to give up, and they spoke in general. All those words that are said every year in these cases. Some people really hinted that now Masha will become not just a woman, rich, but a person who almost single-handedly controls everything than before. Was in charge of the late Slavik, and the wealth was considerable, of course. Part of the fortune should have gone to the children of the deceased. But still no one doubted that Slavik would leave most of his wealth to his wife because during his life he adored Maria. Masha now did not live but simply existed mechanically as if without a soul, without thinking about anything, and without striving for anything. Early in the morning, she woke up with a bang, reveling in her worries with the strongest sedative tablets, so it was easier for her to survive what was happening around her at all. Maria could not accept the fact that she was a widow, and that Slavik would never cover for her again, and that from now on she would also have no one to turn to for advice on the first day after being informed about the death of her husband. Maria wanted to immediately go to the medical center where he underwent such unsuccessful treatment, and with her mind, she understood that no one guaranteed her anything. But her heart demanded that those responsible for such an early death before Slavik was punished. However, she was quickly convinced that such measures had no prospects for a woman. I had to come to terms with the situation that existed before the funeral. She spent almost all her time at home where she was happy with her husband and remembered the first day they met. How she was dressed then. In addition to those same tasteless shoes memorable with broken heels, she wore a bright sundress in a checkered pattern, and when Slavik took her to a cafe for the first time in her life, she wore a shabby black skirt in which she and Rita took turns running to school, and a blouse that she begged a friend of mine for the occasion. Dormitories, yes, and when they already became a couple, poor thing, he had to dress his Mashenka so that she would not look worse than the others. But he did it so delicately so that she would not even think that he was pampering her like that out of pity. Oh, Slavik. Slavik, you were a good person, and how jealous her friends were when Slavik came to pick her up in a car just below the hostel entrance. How they all slept on the long balconies of each other's dorms on their floor. When I look at the shiny bumper of the car and they stay there until the car disappears around the corner, they probably thought they would play enough and give up. A girl from below. But that's not how it happened. She was lucky with Slavik. Don't tell it like it is. She was lucky. Never in all the years of marriage did Masha feel unloved or some unworthy rich spouse, contrary to everything that it is said and written about those who achieved something in life. Slavik did not care about his wealth and could easily spend a considerable amount on his wife's needs without even thinking, oh, how will she live now? And the phone kept ringing and ringing in the receiver. Someone's new voices were heard. Maria barely discovered someone she knows well, but about someone she had no idea how many friends her late husband had. Organizing a funeral is not for the faint of heart. In addition, Masha rejected in advance even the attempts of those closest to her to impose on her services of an undertaker who will do everything himself. No. She is so grateful to her husband that everything connected with the last trip of his favorite business from beginning to end, and Masha plunged into the world of choosing all the necessary gloomy paraphernalia, not to mention that it brought him peace of mind. But in any case, it distracted me a little from what was happening around her. She chose, agreed to pay and inform all the relatives and friends of the deceased about me, and then she had to take charge of organizing the wake. From the cemetery, sometimes Masha thought that all this was not true, and that now someone would come through that door. Slavik is alive and well. He will probably hug her and ask her not to bother too much. Remind her that she hasn't rested for a long time and she needs to sleep. See what she is doing, and in minutes the problem will be solved. As if by itself, Maria herself did not even notice how she dozed off. Probably it was because of overwork that this happened to her before, and now she literally falls asleep on the move. Shook her head to finally come to her senses and only now realized that somewhere in a large apartment her phone is ringing desperately. Probably someone else would like to express condolences to her and say routine words of encouragement. Making their way through the darkness to the place where the phone was abandoned, Masha thought about calling late at night, even though, and to sympathize with the decision so, and that perhaps well-educated people would simply wait until morning. 4 letters that Rita displayed on the screen. Well, Who would doubt that Masha never heard from her middle sister since the moment she lost her husband, and then when she found out, but probably through mutual acquaintances, she found out about Slavik's death. Although it was in her interests, it is clear that Masha had no intention of ruining her relationship with Margarita, but she still remembered the apartment very well. That her sister had long been accustomed to considering that she belonged to everyone. Her husband, which means that now she and her children will own her, and the fact that Reno's future behavior will completely depend on whether she can live there anymore or will have to look for another roof over her head. Masha is not at all proud of her husband's wealth and has always tried to help the family with all possible help within the limits of what is real for her. But Margot was simply going too far in terms of demanding money, which means it was worth talking to her just from a position of strength. Maria was painfully influenced for a long time. And even then she dared to answer the phone. "Hello," she said as calmly as possible. In response, she heard only hoarse and unpleasant laughter, and Masha realized that her sister was drunk. She had not seen Margarita drinking alcohol for a long time. "I remember. It was once like that, but her parents quickly weaned the new daughter's fornication from such a bad habit, and now why did she pick up the old thing? She is really going through Slavik's death. No? Was it just her?
Genre.
So it's unlikely. There is something else here that Masha does not yet know." "Well, you're a widow now." "So Margot." Choking on a drunken laugh, and she herself didn't notice. "It seems, little sister, what he had to do, what he promised me, you don't know. You don't know anything." Masha heard that Margarita was starting to get angry, but could not understand what the reason was. Probably the woman Rita decided, and she herself understands that now the question of her living in her late husband's apartment will be decided without her participation, and about this, anyone is nervous. She answered the phone. "Let's not worry now until the will is read. What to share, so let me calmly bury your husband's husband." The phone happily forgot in response with a drunken laugh. "Yes, you're an idiot. Little sister, you're just an idiot, and I'm an idiot for not insisting that I didn't think right. I was right too." Masha hung up the phone and looked in the mirror. What happened right there? She seemed to have aged in these 2 days. But what was Margarita talking about? Her rights if she had lived in this apartment for many years, having given birth to a child from no one knows who, and not ending up on the street just because of the kindness of her late husband? What kind of rights can we talk about here? Maria was sure that if she were Margot, she herself would have behaved quieter than water and lower than grass. Otherwise, something would have happened. Now the young widow wouldn't kick her relative on the street, but anything can happen. Masha has always been against the abuse of power, money, and position in society, but with such late calls, the middle sister can personally say that I am personally asking for big problems that will be guaranteed for her if Masha stays with anger. The funeral passed in a fog. There were many good and kind words addressed to him. How he helped the deceased, how he loved, how he cared. Mary threw 3 handfuls of earth into the open grave. And then, when a mound of earth grew in place of the hole, she carefully placed a bouquet of blood-red roses. Top. Rest in peace, husband. The wake also went somehow unnoticed. Maria was absorbed in herself much more than she would have liked. The idea that now she would return home and stay there alone, completely alone. The guests would leave. Her children would run away to take care of their own affairs, and she would have to learn to live in this new reality at home. Masha just fell ottoman in the hallway and sat there in silence, looking at the toes of her own shoes, practically stained with dirt from the cemetery. In the past, she would have run here with a rag and a bucket to clean the house. It would be nice and clean, and now she has someone to try, who enjoys Maria's gaze, aimlessly gliding over everything. What was in the hallway photo composition in the frame. Slavik, she, and the children are all cheerful, happy, and tidy. This photo was taken on vacation to exotic islands about 8 years ago. How happy they were. But next to it is a photo of his eldest son's wedding, as he is an adult boy and as is Slavik's experience. Then there was hanging on a hook a shell-shaped souvenir, which they had brought with their husband from last summer's vacation, and then there was the garage key, a seemingly inconspicuous key, the most common, but there was still a certain mystery associated with it, simply because it was precisely this item that was the only one in the house for Masha to use. It was strictly forbidden for Masha to use the garage. To the garage when he felt bad or anxious. There he was worried, composing himself and thinking. Slavik called him his man. Territory in the wife's way there was always forbidden. At first Maria, mocking Slavik, was offended and decided to leave everything as it is. Well, the super wants to stay in the garage. Leave him alone. She won't bother him. And now when her husband hers died suddenly, Masha discovered what to do with herself. The woman let her take the key off the hook and didn't even change her clothes. I never left the house. As far as I remember, it served as a garage. House for the family cars. And Slavik always parked his and his wife's in another garage closer to this one's entrance. It was located quite inconveniently in the courtyard of a high-rise building, which was still about minutes away. If Maria was not now in such a disturbed state of mind, she would never have gone to her husband's garage. Of course, sooner or later she would have to do this, but only later. Not this day, not this minute. But Masha had no choice because she literally couldn't physically be home right now. The woman didn't have a good idea of how to find this man's refuge for her late husband. She only saw him a few times, and then from afar. When they came here together for something necessary, Slavik always trusted Masha and therefore kept the keys to what should remain exclusively his public domain territory, and she, in turn, never used it maliciously. But now Marie was ready to act mountains in search of the very garage, the contents of which she urgently needed to find out at that very moment. Such a unique cure for melancholy was invented by a woman after the funeral. Maria could not immediately find exactly the right yard, and not the eye found it immediately. It was her husband's garage. He stayed in the back, inconspicuous, with the door peeling and a little rusty from time to time. This had nothing to do with the way he conducted his business and how he treated her property, Slavik. Everything was always in order. It shined and did not creak, and in general it was like this, as if yesterday the abandoned state of the garage came off the assembly line. Masha thought that her husband did not value it very much, but what can you need? In any case, Slavik will definitely never need it again. Sighing heavily, Maria began trying to open the abandoned garage. Her late husband's lock, apparently a little rusty because she couldn't get it the first time. But the woman blew on her hands and tried again and again. Finally, the key creaked for the last time. Something clicked inside the lock and Masha turned around. He pulled the door leaf towards himself and looked into the garage. Apparently it was dusty and smelled of old things. That's what happens when in some closed space there are a lot of unnecessary and unclaimed items. Furniture, books, dishes, papers, and other things are stored for so long that it would be a shame to throw it away. But what don't you want? Stay at home until Masha saw nothing unusual. The woman entered, holding the door so that it would not suddenly close and leave her in the dark to her right. She saw a switch and the light of a small lamp that was hanging on the ceiling right at the outlet. Without leaving a trace of a lamp or chandelier, it flooded everything around and Masha screamed, retreating. The entire space from floor to ceiling in the garage was covered with photos. They were photos from different years, but they all represented only two people. For example, Slavik's wife Eats and Margot's son's son. Margot in the larger portrait that was hanging right in the center of the car. Her nephew was about years old. These photos were taken en masse in kindergarten at that time. She even remembered these photos. Her children had exactly the same portrait of a child in the middle, and in the background an inscription to his dear father, "Congratulations on Defender of the Fatherland Day." His children brought this to Slavik, and his nephew hung just above another photo of Margarita in position. The photo was taken on a Polaroid, she remembered. Gave me this camera perfectly and everything would have been fine if only for. Photo. Slavik did not hug his sister by the shoulders, as if in a strange daze. Masha wandered between the rows and looked at the photos, covered with a thin layer of dust. So this is what the second life was like for her husband Margarita. With him as always, smiled happily, looked equally happy and Slavik. Here he is holding his nephew from the car in his arms, turns out to be his own illegitimate son, looking at the boy's face with such pride. But Rita hugs Slavik from behind and kisses his neck, and he, but apparently, holds in front of him. Camera Masha didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Now it became clear why Rita was sewing so much and why she called her about the apartment. Neither of these two thought that Slavik could just die, as in the classic man died suddenly. It happened here too. Slavik was afraid to document anything so that Masha would know, because such actions destroy the family and Slava valued his family. She felt it. She hoped that over time everything would somehow be resolved and a reason would be found. The hero's father promised to pay his bard the same education that his legitimate children received. But Masha was also surprised how Rita, with her not-so-high salary, sent her son to study in a prestigious institution. It turns out that Slavik was just leading her through his nose and quietly paying for higher education behind his back. This child probably planned to get some kind of job later, wandered around the garage for about half an hour. Here in the photos the whole story of his beloved's betrayal. Spouse was collected. Just a documentary, nothing. You will later say that the woman calmly closed the garage and went home the same way she came. But one thing was strange and incomprehensible to her. It seemed as if a mountain had fallen from her shoulders. She no longer missed Slavik. About something that made a fool of you. He and Rita probably spilled it very well behind your back. Well, now the departure of the cars will be announced tomorrow. The will in the registry office brought together everyone who should be here on blood service or service. The notary read what and for whom. There are no surprises in the life spent in Slavika was predictable. Masha simply did not expect to die so soon. She and her children received all the property, and in most movable and immovable property, her marital share was still subject to deduction, since it was acquired in marriage. Death, she was not at a loss. Apparently the man was so careless that he didn't even bother to protect his illegitimate son, born from his legal wife's sister. In any way, he thought he would have time. Well, before Maria and her children had time, they gathered at home and peacefully, in a calm and pleasant environment for everyone. They decided what they would do with the property they now inherited, not presenting any special requirements for their children, except the one-bedroom apartment in which Aunt Rita and his son now lives. The mother must inherit Marita alone, so that in the next presentation there will be someone else involved. Another woman understood perfectly well that her greedy, lying and lazy sister would not calm down and would soon come for what she considered hers. So everything was still ahead because thanks to her marriage. The share owned by Masha had more problems with a small one-room apartment, and there was no agreement. Mother and children decided to wait 6 months to re-register the documents completely, and Masha's mood was simply wonderful. Of course, it would be another months until she could finally take it out on my sister, but every day of waiting is worth it. Rita didn't let herself wait. A call from her sister arrived the next day. You can't say it was a surprise for Masha. She understood that Margot remained silent forever, because at all costs it was necessary to resolve the property issue. Well, that can be resolved. Well, little sister, you keep crying. You are our inconsolable widow. Rita tried to be ironic, putting pressure on the patient, as she thought it was a callous no way. Cheerful, like nothing. Masha replied, I'm packing my suitcase. I bought a trip to the islands. I feel like I need to take a break from this whole morning atmosphere. Seconds there was silence on the other end of the line. Apparently Erida didn't count on such an answer. She was hoping to meet her older sister in tears, but it turned out to be different, completely different, and it was confusing. I wanted to say here. I finally took the bull by the horns, Margarita. Don't hold out the inheritance sponges, and tell the boys to take their rakes out of the car apartment. Share everything from fair enough. She will become the son of the motorcycle. Masha did not have time to finish. She interrupted her with a pre-prepared answer, which sounded so confident that Rita lost all the discussions. Slavik's son. I know, but that does not change the subject. See, there is a desire to make sure the husband doesn't want to. A bastard made with a lot of work from a stupid and unscrupulous person would be worth a penny for the fact that he has been making money for years. He is of age. He doesn't even deserve the obligatory share of you, so little sister. Choose, or you will sweep me out of mine house in 6 months, or I'll throw it out in court, but keep in mind that in court every penny will cost more legal fees, and the cost of the work of a legal lawyer will pay me. So think carefully. Margashka Maria hung up. She understood that Rita would be outraged, run to her parents for intercession, and try to get help on her side. Yulia with her spouses and children, but all this will not have any effect. Today she will really fly on vacation. She is only years old. She has at least half her life ahead of her, and she will try to get money and opportunities to make sure that it was fun, romantic, and beautiful. Everything is in your hands. Everything is at your feet. Just before the flight, one more small matter needs to be resolved, just a small formality that will never have an impact on anything, a small episode of your life that no one except her will know, that she will forget as soon as she finishes with him. Maria came to the kitchen, took a large silver plate from the cupboard and placed it on the table. On top of the plate, she placed a simple A sheet covered exactly with Slavik's handwriting. Perhaps whoever is right is states that a person can have a premonition of his death. How to explain the fact that she found this letter in her husband's papers, packed in an envelope and prepared for sending to the registry office, official, of which he had been taking care of Slavik's business for many years. The letter contained a new one. The man's will there, among others, Irita and her son were mentioned well. Masha arrived just in time, very on time. I found that garage and looked more closely at the papers. My wife lit a match and the flame continued dancing. The paper, devouring the will and transforming line after line into the darkness. The acrid smell of burning paper filled the room and the woman turned on the hood. It had been a long time since she felt as calm and pleasant as in these minutes. Ashes to ashes. Soon ashes went to the bathroom and about what else existed in the world. Slavik's will by itself no longer resembled anything.